Welcome to Spread the Light with Dr. Devika B, where we host conversations that help dispel stigma, stereotypes, and bias, and instead spread hope. Because stigma and stereotypes fester in the dark and they scatter in the light. I'm Dr. Devika Bhushan. I'm a pediatrician and a public health practitioner, a toddler parent, and that's been a lot of things, and also someone who lives with bipolar disorder. And today on the show, I'm really lucky to be welcoming Ashanti Branch, who has over 2 decades of experience in education reform and in youth mental health. He is the founder and executive director of the Ever Forward Club, which this year is celebrating its 20th anniversary. It's a nonprofit that takes students who are disengaged and at risk for dropping out to 100% graduation, 90% college enrollment, and 0% incarceration. He uses award-winning tools like Taking Off the Mask workshop, the Adventure Card game, and the Million Mask movement. And we're going to learn about all of that today. And last year in 2023, Ashanti received the US Surgeon General's Medallion Award for all of this work. And this is, by the way, the highest honor a civilian can receive from the US Surgeon General. And he's been just an amazing force in this field for a long time. And I'm lucky that I've met him in person at an event actually 2 years ago in 2022, also hosted by the US Surgeon General, as it turns out, in LA. And I knew of him before that because of his role in the documentary by Jen Siebel Newsom called The Mask You Live In, about masculinities in the US. So with that, welcome to the show, Ashanti.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here. Thank you. I always, the bios make me nervous, right? I mean, I think it's the highlight reel of all of the chaotic behind the scenes that I live on a daily basis. So I sometimes have to be like, okay, it's okay. It's okay. It's all real, right? And not get too nervous about it. So thank you for reading it.
Oh, of course. I know exactly what you mean. There's a way in which the highlight reel aspects of our professional and personal lives, it doesn't tell the full story, right? And sometimes it makes us nervous to only hear those peak moments encapsulated.
Yeah. Because I'm sure that I
Absolutely.
yelled at somebody on the freeway this morning. I'm sure I yelled at somebody on my way to work. So probably two people I probably yelled at. They didn't hear me yelling at them, but I was yelling at them.
No,
Sometimes
no, for sure.
I think in those bios, when I was more going to talks and I would hear people's bios, I'm like, man, that's amazing. How do they do so many amazing things? And then I realized that when I have my own bio, I'm like, oh, I see. You write the amazing things in the bio, but you don't write all of the stuff that's with some schools. When I go in there, they're like, so what bio do you want us to read? I say, well, do you have to read it? I said, maybe just don't read it. Like, I prefer not to
Mm-hmm.
hype up who I am compared to, like, because I want to be on the even footing with them more. I don't want to be put in a place that's different. So I usually tell some of my story myself, but I really start from this place of here's where the journey of this life started. And so,
Let's
yeah.
start there, Ashanti. Can you give us a picture of who you are and how you came to this work?
Yeah, thank you. So I was raised by a single mother in Oakland, California. My dad died 3 months before I was born. My grandfather, my dad's father, he died a week before my father died. So leading up to my birth, I lost both my grandfather and my father. And my mom, in her grieving and her worry and her 22-year-old college student self, she just began to
Mm.
stress and grieve. And I picked up all of those chemicals of feelings. Like, I was a boy growing up in Oakland, California, and I felt everything in a society where
Wow.
men are not supposed to feel. And if you do feel, you better just not show it. And I'm like,
Mm.
wait a minute, you don't feel this sadness, fear, worry? You don't feel this stress, doubt? You don't feel like, what's up with people around me not feeling this stuff, not feeling the hardship of friendships breaking apart? Like, you're supposed to just get over it really quick. And I felt so many things that I was often told, suck it up, man up,
Mm.
boys don't cry, be a man, like all the things they do to conform you. And it wasn't always happening from adults. It was a lot of time happening from peers. But I think I grew up in that environment. That was the sauce that kind of created this boy growing up. So elementary school got in a lot of trouble. Middle school was following some of the same trouble. Got bullied in middle school. High school finally got my act together. A teacher in middle school really helped shift my life, and she changed my life for my educational focus. And then went to college, graduated as an engineer, started making good money, and then teaching called me. And I was like, nope,
Mhm.
you got the wrong house. You got the wrong civil servant, because this guy wants to be rich, and teachers can't be rich, as far as I know. And my mom was a teacher, so I knew that there was no way that that was going to happen. So I ran from that job to make more money. So I was driving, say, hour and a half each way. That's just on a regular day, just to fight and get away from this calling on my soul that you should be doing this teaching job. And it just made it worse. I thought if I would drove further, made more money, it would make the feeling that you're doing the wrong job go away. And it actually made it worse. And so I said, well, look, like the Peace Corps, they go 2 years and they go back to their regular life. So I said, I'll do that.
Mhm.
So I was going to go teach for 2 years and then come back. And that was 20 plus years ago. So I guess it doesn't always happen the way you envision it, right? But I'm thankful. I talk about this part a lot because I think sometimes there were some hard times in that journey, like my salary dropped 66%. I'm a math teacher, so I did the math. Probably shouldn't have, but
Right.
I did, like my salary dropped
You're aware of
66%.
every dollar and every cent
Oh
because you were a math
man.
teacher.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness. And to imagine like when students would like mouth off and say something like, "Are you only here for this check?" And I could,
Mm.
with proof, I would go over to my
Mhm.
desk because I still have the check stubs from engineering that I would look at once in a while. And I would like show them, here's my teacher check stub and here's my engineering check stub. Now, this is 2 weeks of engineering. This is a whole month of teacher. Now, that's a little
Must be
petty.
like this. Yeah.
Well,
Right.
sometimes it's for those mouthy kids, Sometimes they just need to have proof. Like, oh, you need some proof. And sometimes it was
Right.
because I was like, how dare you think I'm here for the money they pay us here for this work? And I think sadly they don't pay teachers a salary where you feel happy or proud about sometimes, right? I mean, maybe after you teach for 20 plus 30 years, you move up this little scale and you finally have made it to some kind of salary, but is nowhere measuring compared to the other type of professions in the world that pay because those professions are seen as more important. And so I talk about it in
Mhm.
a way because I want people to like know, like we can't expect that schools are going to continue are going to work and get better if we continue to pay teachers just enough to keep them from quitting. And so I have a passion for education and educators in that way. But also it was a personal journey to like make that switch. And it was painful. It was painful at times.
Yeah.
It was sad at times. But I look
Yeah.
back and I'm like, okay, that was part of my journey.
That was definitely an important part of your journey, and it's so striking because we don't pay teachers enough to sustain the best talent, right? And it's exactly what you just alluded to, where people say, "Okay, I'm gonna put in my service time. It's gonna be 2 years, it's gonna be 5 years, it's gonna be maybe 10 years." But nobody says, "I would love to be in this for my life because it's a way that I can support myself, support a family, support people that come next after me." And it is such a shame that we lose, the best and the brightest in so many ways out of this profession where we really need you. You're going to be shaping our youngest, our most impressionable young people at such a critical time in their lives. And you're going to be spending day in and day out with them so many hours in a day, more than their parents, more than, grandparents, more than anybody else. And to not value that is despicable.
And people who don't know, right? So you have to help educate people.
Mhm,
The one thing I'll say about this is some people think that as a teacher, you get
mhm.
paid for summers. Like they used to be like, well, you get summers off, you get paid. I said, you don't get paid for the summer. Like,
Right.
what do you think? Like, you get paid for the time you're teaching, and if you're
Right.
not careful, if you don't know that there's a way that you can stretch your check out, but if you don't do summer school, if you don't work in the summer, there is no money, and that's 2 months, and then on top of that, you don't get another check till after you've worked a month. So it's like you got to stretch 3 months out over the summer if you don't work. So I think just there's a lot of misunderstandings, and there's a lot of lack of empathy and understanding, like the fact that schools are so jacked up, right?
Mhm.
Teachers get a lot of the blame. They don't
Right.
often blame the people making six figures in the offices wearing the suits who walk around the schools with film crews around them taking pictures of was kneeling next to a kid saying hi, right? I mean, those people, they're not so worried, right? And they are the ones who negotiate on behalf of the teachers in the classroom. On top of that, the idea that somehow the way the system has been working, the way schools look like they did 100 years ago, we are
Mhm.
surprised why most of them aren't working. I mean, what other industry do we know of that looks like it did 100 years ago? That there's a teacher in the front of the room, there's students in rows, the teacher tells
Mhm.
them some information. 2 weeks later, the students tell the information back to the teacher. And then if
Right.
I grade you based on how well you memorized the stuff I told you over the last 2 weeks, and then we repeat the cycle over and over again. And if you're bad at that process, then you must be a bad student. Uh,
Mm.
what? What? What other industry are we looking at that is still operating like it did 100 years ago, and we're wondering why it's not working? We should not be surprised. We should be like, it's evident that it's not working. It's working exactly
Mm.
as good as it should based on the times we're in. Same thing with
Totally.
the battle over AI technology. I mean, there are people getting ahead in this AI race, and there are people getting further behind. There's plenty of schools saying you can't use it, you can't touch it, don't worry about it. And what's happening? The people who are learning it are going to be the next billionaires, trillionaires. Why? Because they're figuring out what's. And I think
Right.
what happens with our schools, we oftentimes just keep recycling these patterns, right? That how long it took some schools to finally get computers in their schools, right? When they finally got computers, the new technology was already out, right? They finally got these big boxes on every desk,
Yeah.
right? We had the big boxes, and we had them, fairly soon, but
Oh, I
still,
remember the big boxes. I yeah. Definitely. Oh,
yeah,
man, it's so true. If schools aren't evolving, they're not keeping pace with what's happening externally, but also really helping students thrive in the ways that suit them, right? Like you're saying, this rote memorization as a model works for some kids and it leaves a lot of other kids out and behind. And we have to find ways to recruit, retain, inspire more of the kids. And so, speaking of effective changes, can you tell us about the Million Mask movement? Where did that idea come from?
yeah. So, uh, as a first year teacher, when I started the Ever Forward Club, I wasn't trying to start a nonprofit. I was trying to help some young men pass algebra. Fast forward 15 years, we get it featured in this documentary called The Mask You Live In. It came out in 2015. In that documentary, when they asked to come film where I was working at, I was at my old alma mater, Fremont High School in Oakland. I was working with some young men, and I said, "Well, you should probably go to our other club at this other school, Arise High School, because those students they're youth leaders. They're leading the clubs. They got it. I've been there for 2 years. They're doing great. The young men I'm right here with, they're not really taking over the leadership. It's a resistance." And they're like, "No, we
Mm,
want to see where you're at." I said, "Okay, well, just know you're not going to see young men opening up. You're not going to see young men deeply connecting because I'm battling just to get them to like listen to each other sometimes." And so I was thinking, well, what if the film crew was already coming? Because I know they can't talk about their feelings without creating a fight. Because we've had many
mm,
arguments in these meetings, like just trying to make space for them. But it's fear. If you believe that to let people see your true feelings is dangerous, then you're going to fight against that danger. And since I'm the person bringing this experience to them, they would fight against me. So I said, what if they don't have to talk about it? What if they can just write it? And so the first activity, I actually printed
mm,
out masks. We wrote words on the front. If you see the documentary, you see them. I just hand them a picture of a mask. I say, write words on the front and write words on the back. The front are the things you let people see. The back are things you don't usually let people see that are harder to let people see. And then we threw the papers at each other. We mixed them all up. And that's how the activity first began. And I'm still waiting to see what's going to happen because I don't know if it's going to work. I don't know if they wrote real stuff on it. I don't even know because I had never tried this activity before. But I was like, if it works, and what ends up happening is they open these pieces of paper up and they start reading them. And man, that room dropped in. I mean, it dropped in like I had never been able to drop them in because what they were looking at on that paper was somebody else's words that was probably similar. And as you start reading them off, you were hearing similar words: fear,
mm.
anger, worry.
Oh, so you were passing the masks around and they each were reading out for the first time somebody else's
Yeah.
thoughts.
Yeah. We actually had a little paper fight with them. I didn't pass them out. We made them throw pieces of paper at each other, which was easy to get them to do. And then once we finished the little paper fight, everyone opened the mask that they ended up with. And all of it ended up with somebody else's. Sometimes we had circles
Got
where people end up with their own. And I tell them, hey, it came back to you. But now don't tell anybody because no one knows what
mm,
mask you got if you don't say anything. But that powerful
right.
piece of that deep connection of like, oh, wow, wait, somebody else in here is going through this. How is that possible? Everyone is always on the outside so cool. And I think that's the
Yeah.
missing piece is that we don't realize that so many things are happening. And so since that was the first time it happened and it worked, we started doing these workshops. And In the early days, I was just collecting the mask at the end of workshops because it felt like these wrinkled masks I couldn't throw away. Like I got one right here. I got one right here. The one that I hold on to the most. Now I have all the masks we've ever made. Sorry, I left the camera. Sorry.
No, you're fine.
So in one of our first big
Yeah.
workshops, you can see this piece of paper is all wrinkled. You see it? So it
Yes.
was a snowball fight, about 250 young men. And at the end, I smash them all out. I sit on them or I put some books on top of them to flatten them out as much as possible. Paper, when it's wrinkled, it turns into like cloth, And so
Right.
this mask, this is what happens. So the front of the mask, happy, smart,
Smart.
outgoing,
Outgoing.
and caring.
Right.
And then I'm going to show you the back because the back is, you probably saw some of the back bleeding through the front
Right.
for a good reason because look at the back.
Oh my gosh. Just so much anger. Nothing else.
18 times. And it was this,
Wow.
when I saw this, I mean, I still get goosebumps when I think about it again. Like, how many of our young men are walking around smart, happy, cool, outgoing, and yet behind
Yes.
they're carrying all this stuff that they don't let anybody see, and it's coming out somewhere. It has no choice. Like, there's only so much you can store all of that stress and worry and anger before it either takes out your organs, it takes
Mhm.
out your health, it takes out people
Mhm.
you care about because it's energy in motion. That's what we tell our young men. Emotions are energy in motion. So you can be like, I'm sad. I'm sad about that. Or I'm angry about that. But most of our young men, they turn everything into anger. They turn sadness into anger. They turn
Right.
fear into anger. They turn doubt into anger. They turn embarrassment into anger. They turn because the anger in our community is accepted.
It's safe.
It's almost respected. You get angry enough, no
Mm.
one's gonna mess with you. You get angry enough, no one's gonna talk. No one's gonna say nothing bad about you. You can
Right.
command enough people being worried, some fear of you. I don't know if that's good, but I've seen it happen. I've been there, and so imagine that. Like, what we try and help them see is that, man, there's so much. So we began. This was where it started. These pieces of paper, and then, long story short, a teacher from some school called me and said, "Hey, your activity is not safe." I was like, "What are you talking about?" They were like, "Well, the thing you did in the documentary." I was like,
Mm.
well, I didn't teach anybody how to do that. What do you mean? Like, are you telling me you did that activity with your students and then you told me it was unsafe? I've been working with these young men for months, and we were in that room for an hour plus. You saw a 5-minute clip and you tried to do it with students. And I was like, thank goodness this teacher blamed me out loud. But how many teachers
Right.
are blaming me in silence? And so I talked to some of my mentors and we decided we're going to have to give it away. Like, either
Mm.
I give it away or figure out how to teach people how to do it the right way. Because I don't want
Right.
people blaming the other. I didn't teach you. I didn't tell you to do this with your students without understanding the behind the scenes. And so, long story short, it became what is currently called the Million Mask Movement, and we have a goal of engaging 1 million people around the world in this self-reflective tool. And now it's a 4x6 card. We sometimes do paper, if depending on the activity we're doing with folks, but it's that same process. It's that words on the front, words on the back of the mask. And it's been amazing. It's amazing wherever community I'm in. I was just in New York this past week doing some workshops with some high school students and some middle school students and just watching them find ways to find those words and sometimes not even have words. One young man said, I don't know myself well enough yet to know what I don't show.
Mm.
Like, that was
That's really
beautiful. I mean,
insightful.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, so powerful. And as I heard him speak, he speaks with such a soft, you can't almost hear him. And I kind of I wanted him to yell. Like, I really wanted to push him to yell. It's in him.
Mm.
He has a voice, but he has been either told that his voice doesn't matter or whatever it may be. This is me making up a story on the outside, but what I watched happen in this exchange. And part of me was like, I should tell him to yell. And I didn't do it. It was a moment of me just experiencing the space of just like listening to him and almost really, really having a hard time hearing him as much as I was
Mm.
intentionally listening. I was like, his
Mm.
voice has been blocked. But it was my first time meeting him, so I didn't want to push too hard. So I just told him, I see you, brother. I just want to let you know I see you. I had a hard time hearing you, but I see you. And I hope that you
Mm.
can let yourself be heard more. And he heard it. He heard the words. He didn't say anything really back, but he heard what I said. And that's all I could do is just plant a seed that you were seen today. I hope you know that you're seen, right? And how many people don't ever, either they don't believe it or they don't never hear it. They're seen. And I think
Mm.
that's so important.
That is really powerful. And as you were thinking about how to operationalize the Million Mask movement and what elements needed to be in place for it to feel like a safe experience for people, what does it entail from beginning to end? Besides the front and back of that mask, what else is part of it?
Yeah. Well, so when we created the first activities that we gave out, we started telling teachers, hey, there's a free tool, sign up for this. We had over 600 teachers sign up around the country, around the world to want to do the activity. We were like, okay, first we need to make sure that people are not trying to do this as a passive thing where I'm gonna just hand you this thing and then I'm gonna go off and do something else. And because we're giving it away, once it leaves you, people are going to translate it to mean what they want it to mean. And as a former teacher, I made lots of
Mhm.
curriculum. I helped people create curriculum. This is what I think I'm somewhat good at, is helping create experiences. So we tried to be as thorough as we could. And also it was nervous because it was the only thing that as a nonprofit we had that people were inviting us to come and deliver. So one of my mentors was like, Shanti, you got to decide, do you want to make an impact or do you want to make money? And I was like,
Mm.
can I do both? Can I have both, please? He's like, well, yeah, but in this context, if you know that this activity got to get out, you can't put a money barrier because you know how schools are. They have no money really. They barely are operating in themselves. And so we just wanted to make an impact. So I was like, okay. So first ask this question. How much time do you have? Do you have a 10-minute block? Or do you have 20 minutes? How much time do you have to work with the students? Really trying to make it so teachers would use it the most healthy way and not make it
Mhm.
unsafe, right? Because it's supposed to be anonymous for a reason. It's anonymous because we want students to be able to have their paper out there and no one knows it's them. But even if you tell somebody it's anonymous, they may not still believe it. So they may still be hesitant about what they would write on the paper. And so we gave them the steps. Ask your class what they understand about the concept of wearing an emotional mask. Now, when we started this is before the pandemic. So imagine our workshop was called Taking Off the Mask. So once the pandemic came, we had to change some of the curriculum or the sayings because everyone was thinking about masks being personal protection masks. So some people were like, are you trying to tell people not to wear a mask? Like, this has nothing to do with that. This campaign started before this, right? But we had to then adapt to the new
Mm.
world we were living in by talking about emotional masks, okay? We're talking about emotional masks as opposed to any other type of mask that people could twist it to mean. And so it was really giving teachers a step-by-step guide to how to make that space. And if you're a teacher who is afraid of doing your own work, it's going to be hard because if you haven't yet willing to look at your own mask, and I'm just telling you to do this as an activity. I'm trying to make it a grade for you. You're trying to build connection. So it can't be connected to a grade. It can't be connected to, maybe I give you points for being here today, but I'm not giving you points because I'm looking at your work and checking that you did everything. I'm going to trust that you're going to give your best. That's how I do it when I do a workshop with 1,000 people. I do a workshop with 12 people. I'm asking you to give your best. And whatever your best is going to be enough. I don't care about what you draw, whatever you feel comfortable drawing. Don't draw anything because I don't want people to get into their head that, oh, I have to have a perfect drawing or I can't draw like these people. And it becomes a comparing or trying to get people to say, oh, this is me. This is me as best as I can demonstrate on this piece of paper. This is me. And so we gave that out to folks all over, 600 plus educators. And then we just didn't have a strategy around how we were going to get everything back because a lot of teachers didn't mail the stuff back to us. And like, what's going on? And we were spending a lot of shipping money to get these cards around the world. And I was like, oh, we didn't figure this out. So part of it was like, we shutting this down. This is not working. We want the cards back because at least it lets us know that we were making an impact. We know we were mailing them. They were arriving. We heard from teachers that they were doing them. We said, well, can you get those cards back to us? Can you? And we didn't have a plan around that. We didn't have a strategy. And so we've learned a lot over the years of how we grow the movement. And so in 2019, end of 2019, we got a grant from LinkedIn. It was a compassion award. It gave us enough money to build the first prototype of the website. So we put it online so that teachers didn't have to worry about mailing anything back to us. But a lot of teachers wanted the tactile. They wanted the touch of the hand. We were like, how are we going to get people to use this website when they only want us to mail them the materials? And then
Mm.
2020 came and it was like, oh boy,
Yeah.
they have to do it this way because everyone is remote learning. And so then that's when the website took off. It was something I had envisioned, like how we were going to solve one problem, and it solved a whole different problem that we didn't even know was on the way. And then that's when the website took off. And it was so helpful during that time that teachers could use it with their students, figure out what was going on with their students in a really safe, anonymous way, and really begin having healthy conversation with students about those masks.
It's so interesting to hear about all of the different elements that went into this journey, from the word mask taking on a different connotation to people needing to iterate and making it less material and more virtual. And today I'm wondering two things. One is, what is the youngest you think that a kid might be able to experience this and really understand and use it? And number two is, how many masks have been created through this?
Yeah. So when we do workshops, and the only reason I was looking over here, I have some masks on my desk and I was trying to see. There's some elementary masks over here somewhere. So
Mhm.
we know in elementary school, around fifth grade is probably a good age. We've done workshops with fourth graders, they get it too. If they're too young, they're not yet used to being metacognitive. They're not used to thinking about their thinking. So when you ask them,
Yes.
what is it you don't show? The younger they are, and some fourth graders are young, still young, and some fifth graders too. I don't let people see my socks. I don't let people see my
Mhm.
feet. I don't let people see my underwear, right? Like they're very literal in terms of what you don't let people see. They're not able to think about the nuance of characteristics yet. So
Yeah.
it all depends on
And
that.
they may also not be in that place of intentionally shielding parts of themselves. So, my almost 3-year-old, right, there is no level of artifice. What he's feeling is what he's going to be displaying. And whatever it is fully there in the present moment. And at some point, we lose that. We begin to build up these walls. And it's like you're saying, it's somewhere in that elementary school zone, depending on who you are, it might happen sooner
Yeah.
or later. But it's very interesting to hear about these examples of socks,
Yeah.
feet, underwear. That's very cute.
And imagine that the age is also depends on what type of school they're in. Is it a school that's very caring and nurturing, or is it a school where there's a lot of like, I have to put on an edge because it's not safe to be too nice and too kind or whatever. And you start learning that early. I was at an elementary school. They were doing a documentary screening for parents. I have a second grader at the end of the second grade parents. She says, I have a question about just how do I help my son? I don't want him to be treated badly. Like, I don't want him to become a bully, and I also don't want him to be a victim, right? So how do I help him learn? She's a second grade parent. So her boy's about 7, maybe. He was having lunch with his best friend. When they are together, they're like occupying the same space. And then she said, and some bigger boys came over while they were having lunch one day. They share lunch. Their lunch is like pretty much stacked on top of each other. They're just sharing lunch. And some bigger boy came over and said, "Oh, you two are gay." And this second
Mm,
grader didn't even know what that meant. So he came home that day,
mm,
asked his mom, "Mom, what is gay?" And she's like, "Huh? What's going on here? What are you talking about?" He told her the story, what happened. And she felt this pressure like, how do I let him continue having a best friend where they're so kind and caring with each other? They take care of each other and then worry about what the bigger boys or the playground are going to say and do because he doesn't fit the mold of what these other boys. And who told this bigger boy that that is not okay? Where did he get that language from? He's beginning to actually box those boys into a system that he has been told that is not okay. And imagine how often that happens. So it doesn't always happen in homes, but it sometimes does. It sometimes happens with other kids on the playground who then we conform to like, oh wait, I can't sit close to my friend. I can't. Oh wait a minute, I don't want the other boys to treat me like this, so I'm going to act this way. And I think we see so many things. Have you seen the document? There's a film called Close. I think a Belgium film. It was nominated for
mhm.
an Oscar, and it was about these two boys. They left middle school, best friends, spending the night at each other's house. They pretty much spent the whole summer together. They go to high school, and now the pressure to fit into the high school. And one of the friends joined the ice hockey team. One of them didn't. And man, it just began that pressure of them separating from each other. That friendship that was so close, then it had to get ripped apart. And for some, it's so hard to accept it and to understand it. How did I just lose my best friend? Like, what did that just happen? Did I change? Did they change? What are the things happening? And sometimes if we're not careful as adults, because we've gotten good at being like, well, shoot, they don't want to be your friend, don't be their friend. But when you're 10, 11, 12, 13, this really matters a lot. So you're not as easy writing people off like that. So it's that pressure too of like, man, how do we help young people have those feelings that they handle them in a delicate way? They don't like try and ignore them. And I think parents, teachers, adults in our lives have a responsibility to really channel back. What was it like to be 12 and to lose a friend? What was it like to wonder, somebody, why don't you like me anymore? What happened? But if you don't remember that anymore, if you've erased your childhood memories, then when a kid in your life happens to them, you tell him, just get over it. Like it was that easy. And I think that's what sometimes gets missed.
Yeah, how huge those moments are with the first time it's ever happened, and it means everything because it's your sense of self and your identity, and, you know, you think something's wrong with you because that person has suddenly decided today you're not worthy
Yeah.
of being their friend. No, absolutely. And going back to kind of the math teacher aspect of this, how many to
Yeah.
the way of the 1,000,000 are we so far? Do you have a count?
We're a long way. We're at about over 80,000. So 80,000 is definitely where we are. Yeah, in my mind, we would already be there. Like, of course, everyone would just do this. So we're a long way away. Original goal was 100,000. The original campaign
Mhm.
came out as the 100,000 masks challenge. So we were like,
Okay.
okay, 100, we're going to get there. We're going to get there fast. So we started getting close. And then summer 2020, we had a group of young men who were a part of this social emotional leadership academy, and we rebranded it as the Million Mask Movement. So it's almost like we took the goalpost and moved it 10 times further
Yeah.
away. I want things to happen fast. I realized that people would be asking, so what happens when you get to 1,000,000? I said, I don't know. We got to get there first and then we'll figure it out. I didn't start this with like, we're going to do a research project. We're going to write this book. I started with a group of young men at Fremont High School in Oakland, California, making these masks. I started making masks with workshops, people around the country, holding on to them because something told me to hold on to them. It didn't start with this a big strategy. It was like, I can't throw these away. Like this one, this wrinkle one. This is from 2004. I think this is like 10 years old, this piece of paper that I've
Wow.
held. I keep it
Yeah.
in a plastic sleeve for a lot of them. But like
Mhm.
this is the journey of it has been, okay, what do you do next? I didn't start this as a researcher. I started this as a practitioner working with young people. And so what we are now doing is we're going to put out our first research paper. It's actually, I have a
Mhm.
draft of it here. It's the tale of two schools. We're looking at this private school and this public school, sophomore boys, and how their masks showed up, how they looked. And people would think that public school and private school, they're so different. Like these kids have all these resources and these kids have no resources. And may think that their masks look different, but there's amazing similarities between just what
Mhm.
they don't talk about, what they do. We're super excited to put that out. We've been working on it for a while. I think I could continue trying to perfect it, and I realized that's not going to be the best way for it. So we're going to put it out and let it do its work in the world, whatever it's going to do. And I'm super excited. We're going to start telling some of the stories of what we're learning. I met a researcher and she was like, wait, did you say this is when we were like 70,000 or something? And I said, we have about 70,000 masks. She's like, wait, how many pieces? She was like shocked. I thought she couldn't hear me. And I was like, yeah, just
Mhm.
70,000. She is shocked that I
Huge.
have so many and I'm shocked that we have so little. She's like, Ashanti, you have a PhD right there. What are you talking about? Like, do you understand that? And no, I didn't. I wasn't thinking of it that way. I mean, do you know where a million is? You know how far a million is away? And I hadn't thought about how we could begin telling the story early. I thought we had to get to the
Yeah,
goal and then come back and tell the story, but we're going to start telling the story now. And we're learning a lot. We're seeing a lot, and it's been really beautiful.
that's amazing. I can't wait to read the paper. That's awesome.
I'm excited. It'll be out soon. It's pretty much ready. The last edits have already happened. Now we're just fine tuning the style.
So it sounds like it's gonna be out on your website in time for people to see as
Yeah,
they watch this
that's
episode.
right.
That's great. We'll link to it. And one question that I think always comes up around all of this, right, is what if you learn anonymously that somebody is struggling with thoughts of suicide, somebody is really struggling with aggression that really might burst out in some real way in the real world? How do you trace that back? How do you help with that specific situation?
Yeah, normally we don't know until we get back to the office with all the cards, right? We go
Yeah.
through and start sorting through them. If when we do an activity and workshop and we, bring some volunteers up and they read off some cards randomly,
Mhm.
those students get to read what words they want to read. Like if
Mhm.
I got a card that said something really harsh on it, I may not feel comfortable reading, so I may read one of the easier words. So we don't know when we do a live workshop. It has happened a couple of times because it's anonymous. We first see how students are going to respond to it. Like, did a student notice that word that showed up? Because I don't want to bring unnecessary attention to it, but I'm listening to all the words that are read out. And so let's say someone does mention thoughts of suicide. Once the students read off cards, we say, what did you hear? What did you notice? What are you feeling? And we ask the audience. And either someone will bring it up or someone won't bring it up. And I'll say, well, maybe someone noticed that there was a word there that was pretty hard to hear. Did anybody hear that word? And people would like raise their hand. They heard it, but no one pointed it out. And I say, we don't know who that card belongs to. We made this anonymous for a reason. And what I think happens in that moment, I think a couple of things
Mhm.
happen. They saw that the reaction wasn't like People laughed. I don't know who wrote it because it's anonymous for that reason. And it gives the room and the freedom for me as a practitioner, but also for the school to say, now that you are aware that this is here, it is important that you begin to do some kind of learning, some kind of poster campaign, some kind of experiential opportunities for students to come to safe places. Because guess what? If I don't think people can handle it, maybe the only time I've ever been able to write it was when I got to write it anonymous and throw that piece of paper away. Now, I wrote it not knowing what I was going to have to do with that card, but man, thank goodness they took that card. Thank goodness they mixed them up with all the other cards because the students are seeing us collect them all. They're like, okay, it's out of my hands, and they're wondering what's going to happen next. We never know. And so if we do come back to the office and we do start seeing some of those words, we had that happen, and we just type the words out. We send an email to the teacher or the school and say, hey, we just want to let you know some of these things came up, and we want to support you to do the next steps. Sometimes I find schools are action oriented to do it and some are not. I think the tricky part is I get really frustrated when they're not,
Mm.
taking it serious to take next steps to do something. It's easy to be like, if it's anonymous, then I don't know who it belongs to. So that I can't do anything. That's an easy out if you were looking for an excuse. But if you don't want to really do something, any excuse will do. Well, we don't know who it belongs to. What are we going to do? We're not going to go ask every student. No, you don't have to do all that. How about you make sure that students know here's where you go if you need some support? Where are the posters around campus that tell students who are struggling to who they can call, who they can go to, what room in the school they can go to anonymously, and what are the ways that they can get the support without you having to figure out who it is? Now, when we were in the
Right.
virtual world, we had a student who changed their name on the computer. It was Zoom time, right? Changed their name,
Mhm.
wrote a really heartfelt statement about what they were thinking about doing, and then changed their name back, right? So by the time the
Mm.
message got to the box and people noticed it, that person had changed their name back already.
Interesting.
It
Yeah.
was wild. It happens. It was in middle school. It happened so fast, and I was like, okay, all right. Well, let's say everyone take a breath. Everyone take a breath. Because somebody in the comment was like, why would somebody write that? Now we didn't know if it was somebody being a jokester or if
Mm.
somebody was like just needed to see how the room was going to respond. Some kid said,
Yeah.
hey, you're not alone, but because it wasn't a real name, it was some kind of code. And we had another meeting with the school. And we actually found out the student actually told one of his teachers that it was him. And so I think what happens is sometimes people are wondering who can they tell these things that they're battling with and wonder how not to make it worse. I mean, I think people want to have those deep relationships, those deep connections. But if you don't trust that people can handle it, then we keep it to ourselves. If you
Right.
live in a home where secrets are the norm, don't talk about what happens in this house. Therefore, what do I talk about the stuff that I'm going through if I can't talk about it? Therefore,
Mhm.
I get good at just performing what I need to perform so that everyone is good around me. Maybe I'm taking care of my parents. Maybe I'm looking out for their needs so much that I don't think they have time to deal with my needs, and so therefore I operate like that. And I think those are the ways that so often we miss the opportunity. Because me growing up, I was the oldest, always working, helping take care of my siblings. So a lot of stuff that I was dealing with, I didn't talk to my mom about it. I just kept it to myself. Not that I
Mm.
didn't think she loved me. I believe she did. But I was like, she ain't got time. She ain't got energy.
Mm.
She got to take care of the littlest ones, right? And so I'm
Mm.
always trying to look out for others. And so therefore, some of those needs went unmet. Not because I don't think
Mm.
somebody could have helped, but because I had made the decision or I felt the need to make the decision for the adults in my life.
Right.
Yeah.
What you're doing here is you're really making space for people to have their needs, their emotional needs, at least be heard and feel like there is a space for that. And
Yeah.
that's a big, big thing.
Yeah. It's been beautiful.
Um,
What I see the most when I hear from students when they do a reflection is that I didn't realize that so many people here were going through the same thing. I'm so glad to know that I'm not alone. I wish I
mm.
knew who these cards belonged to so I could go and talk to them and listen to them. The depth of how students understand this is been so beautiful, and we do it with adults too, teachers and parents. And I think just
Yeah.
this awareness that like we sometimes get judged from what we see on the outside, right? Or people judge us from what they see. Like, but there's so much more to me than you can see. That's one
Yeah.
of the taglines of the movement, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's so much more to me than you can see.
yeah.
So, with that in mind, what is a mental health myth that you think is out there that you want to settle the score on?
Beautiful question. A myth. Well, I was just talking about how my community handles it. That To have worries and thoughts that people can't name doesn't make anything wrong with you. Doesn't make anything wrong with you. That
Mm.
as humans, we feel. And if your feelings have been twisted around because you have been having to not fully be able to feel them, you may not be able to explain them. So when I ask you what's going on with you, and I'm like, I don't know, I can't explain it, it doesn't mean nothing's going on with me. It means I don't have the words. And I think sometimes people think that if something's going on with you, you should be able to explain it. And I think we have to take a break and take a moment of just quiet and calm and say, actually, I don't know what I'm feeling. And when we rush people to try and come up with a description of the feeling that is hard to name, it's not fair to make a person who never got a chance to talk about how they feel to now want to come up with it right away and then blame them for not being able to do it. So I think the myth is that because you're feeling odd or you're feeling some type of way that you should be able to explain it clearly to somebody who asks you how you're feeling. I think we have a society that has told us not to show a lot of feelings, especially the feelings that make other people uncomfortable. And so we need to give each other time and say, okay, well, like I'm not a therapist in that way, but I am a person who listens. And so when somebody's coming to me, a young person, and they're like, man, I've just been like, so like, I don't even know how to say it. And I'm like, oh, take a breath.
Mhm.
Let's just slow it down. Don't be in a hurry to tell me what it is, and I'll just maybe I'll name off some emotions for them to think about. Like, are you sad? Are you worried? Are you afraid? Are you? And a lot of people have very limited emotional knowledge, or at least of how many emotions can they list. And if you can only list
Yeah.
5 emotions, then it's gonna be really hard to explain. No, I'm not angry. I'm not feeling. No, I'm not angry. I'm not sad. Like if then you're like, what word is in there? There's a word out there for it,
Mhm.
right? And so I think that's one of the myths is that we should be able to explain it always at the drop of a dime when someone is asking us when we're feeling something. And I think the other side of that is we need to be giving more emotional education to young people. They should be able to list 15, 20, 30 emotions. Now, is that a vocabulary lesson or is it a human lesson? Well, sometimes people will think, well, if it doesn't fit in the curriculum, then we can't do it. Well, that's part of the problem. That's why the curriculum ain't working. Because you got kids
Right.
walking around feeling all these things they can't talk about, and you're wondering how you're going to make it an assignment. That is a challenge, right? And so I think our schools continue to sometimes perpetuate these things.
You're essentially saying like the most important thing that young people need to understand and learn is really a set of deeply layered skills. Like you have to name the emotion, you have to have enough vocabulary and enough ability and practice to do that with yourself. And then building on top of that, what do you need from another
Yeah,
person to help you feel differently in that moment in terms of what to call it, emotional fluency or just emotional awareness,
yeah,
right? Around yourself and other people, and then what makes things better for you
that's
or
right.
worse for you.
That's right.
Absolutely. It's
That's right.
huge. I will do one final question, which
Okay.
is what do you hope to see for us for our future?
Yeah. I'm a big feeler. So my hope is that we find more ways to love. I just think
Mm,
our communities, our world is lacking so much love. And I think maybe that we're not lacking the love, we're just showing so much of hate. You know what I'm saying? I
yes.
think the love is in there. I think we've let hate take over the voices of the loudest speakers. And it's devastating. And it's devastating our youth in ways that we're going to keep finding out later. And we wonder why our communities are ravished by young people who don't seem to care. But I think the young people are going to help us figure it out. I hope that our communities will continue taking care of our schools. I hope we will make it a priority
Mm,
that talking about our feelings, finding ways to talk about it, healthy and safe ways. I hope for our world that people take that journey from the head to the heart. One of the quotes we say is the longest distance most people travel is the 18 inches between their head and their heart. But most people get stuck in their heads. And so
mhm,
we invite people to just take that journey down to our heart. And I think if we stay up in here, we can find all the things wrong with other people out there. We can keep pointing fingers. But when we come
mm.
into our hearts, we're like, man, what is that person dealing with? What are they going through? And so I just hope we can find more love. I think we need it.
Ah, amen. Thank you for that beautiful vision for our future and for just helping viewers and listeners learn about the powerful work that you're doing here. Really
Thank you.
appreciate it.
Thank you so much.